Oh, we're live now.
We're live now. Yep. My girlfriend just texted me that we're live, as did my mother. So we know we have 2 listeners.
Nice.
My girlfriend and my mother.
Hi, girlfriend. Hi, mother.
Hello. Okay. We've still got like 20-ish minutes left in the show. We can make it work.
We can pull this off.
This is a very... I should probably hang up on Jimmy now. Thank you for your help, Jimmy. Everyone at home, say thank you, Jimmy. I don't know why I said that. Okay, I'm just ecstatic that it's actually working. Okay, so welcome to the first episode of the Comic Book Book Club podcast.
We are your co-hosts, Kendra Forte.
And Matt Lasik.
Yes.
Yeah.
We nailed it. 3rd time's the charm.
3rd time's the charm. It really is. So, this is a show where we're going to read comic books and then talk about comic books. I'm going to talk about how the structure of the show is going to work now. Sorry, I'm very excited that this is actually working, so I'm stumbling over my words. So we are going to operate on a alternating week schedule. I'm just going to refer to them as A-week episodes and B-week episodes. This week is supposed to be the first A-week episode. On A-week episodes, we will both talk about the previous A-week episode's comic book that was assigned and assigned next A-week episode. We're going to read about the comic book that we assigned the last A-week and then assign a comic for the next A-week. We're doing that so that you, the listeners who are reading along at home, aren't being rushed to try and read and digest a full storyline within a week. And then the B-week episodes, which hopefully will start next week if everything works correctly.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers freaking crossed, my man. Those are going to be more general talk showy episodes, less structure, more like answering listener questions if there are any, like going over a concept or something that a listener wants explained that isn't like well explained within the confines of one specific story. Maybe doing movie reviews if we feel like it, doing like comic book headlines that catch our eye. Yeah. So our goal with this show, we want this to be as accessible, thank you, for people as possible, both for people that are longtime fans of the comic book industry or people that don't have a clue about comics. So our first step towards furthering that goal, I have pulled up a website with a list of comic book terms that we will probably be using in our discussions. So we're just going to go through the list, and then I'll probably throw in a couple terms of my own that aren't on the list. I have to remember not to rush, because even though we technically already did this, no one heard it. So we are going to take our time through this.
First time around, it took 5 minutes, and we have 20 minutes to use.
Well, that also, we only barely got through the first section of the list.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so first off, we're going to talk about the people that actually work, the people behind the comic book that you probably will someday hold in your hands and read. First of which being obviously the writer, the person that makes the story. And the depth of writing can range anywhere between like a full script plot type thing of like, this character says this exact thing, and then the camera cuts to this angle, and then the other character says this other thing. Or it can just be more of a loose story synopsis where the writer then leaves it up to the rest of the creative team to fill in the blanks. That second method is usually used if there's one writer working on more than one comic book, which doesn't really happen as often now as it did back when the industry first was getting its legs. Next is the penciler or artist. The penciler being a separate role is not really seen much nowadays, but historically speaking, the penciler would be the person to actually draw the rough pencil art for the various issues and panels, and then the penciler would then hand their work off to the inker. Again, this isn't nowadays a penciler and inker are usually the same person. Back in the day, you would have pencilers working on multiple ongoing series at the same time, so it was more efficient to have separate inkers just basically going over the lines that the penciler already made just for time's sake. I feel like this is much lower energy on our third go. It's okay.
Yeah, because first time around, I was so excited that the inker and the penciler were two separate characters. Oh,
Characters?
wow. Characters. They sound like villains. I am the penciler.
I am the inker. Yeah, Kendra was very surprised when I informed her that the penciler and the inker used to be two separate jobs, as well as the colorist. Nowadays, coloring is all done digitally. There's just like companies that will be hired, like third parties, to just do the coloring, or the coloring is done by the artist who is also doing the penciling and the inking. But yeah, again, back in the day, the colorist would be a separate person from the penciler and the inker, adding the color to the panels, just for, again, time's sake and making sure that they had a good product. And then another outdated position is the letterer. They had people that were very good at writing the same letters in the same ways. So they had them writing out all the dialogue, the thought bubbles, the onomatopoeia and such, the wham, boom, pow. But, nowadays it's all done with a keyboard and typefaces. So
yeah, I think that's my favorite job, because there's nothing I admire more than people who are able to write the same way for a long period of time.
Couldn't be me.
Couldn't be me.
We here at WMUC have awful handwriting.
Oh shoot, did we do the station ID?
Well, it's not the top of the hour. Regardless, you're listening to WMUC College Park Digital. Welcome. So yeah, those are the people that work behind the scenes of the comic. And then you have how the comics are actually published. Usually it's in like single issue format. The average single comic issue is between 20 to 32 pages, but for like special anniversary issues, they can go up to like 50 or 100 pages.
And how many stories are in 20 to 32 pages? Is it one story in 20 pages?
So back in the 60s, 70s, etc., when comics were first starting, single issues were, while they might have had the same characters, they were very much like self-contained stories, like your villain of the week. Nowadays, like pretty much every comic has some sort of grand overarching plot, and then within that grand overarching plot, there's like, you no longer, it's the days where you can pick up one issue and read a complete story and say, wow, that was a great complete story. Those are gone. Everything's in like 2-parters, 3-parters, 4-parters, etc. Sometimes I'll be looking up a storyline that I'm interested in, and it's like, here's where you read parts 1 through 8, and I just go, okay.
That's fine.
And then past the single issues, there's multiple ways where comics are bundled together and reprinted. The most common is trade paperback, or TPB. That's what I'm going to be referring to them as, TPB. That is, it collects multiple single issues to present you the full story in those issues. They can be as thin as like 5 to 8 issues for one smaller storyline, or there can be a TPB that collects like a whole crossover thing, and it's like 1,000 pages.
So that's what you gave me, a TPB.
Yes, mostly I'm going to try, for efficiency's sake, the stories that we will be covering here, I'm going to try and only pick ones that are reprinted in TPB form, just so that you're not having to track down each individual single issue to get the full story. I'm going to, if you want to do that, I will be like presenting options for both, of like, here's a trade paperback to read, and here's the single issues that are in it. But up to you, listeners. Occasionally, trade paperbacks will be hardcover. Nothing much to talk about there. It's just the same type of thing in a hardcover. Those are usually saved for like more important things or bigger collections, such as an omnibus, which those are very large hardcover editions. Omnibuses are usually reserved for like collecting an entire specific artist or writer's run on a comic book into one package. And I just use another term there, run, that a run refers to a specific area of time where there was either one consistent writer or one consistent artist or a consistent team of artists. And you usually describe it in this website actually has a example, if I can find it, apologies. For instance, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's run on the Fantastic Four lasted 100 issues. So yeah, that's what a run is. And then, so in comics, you have your ongoing series where you know, your Batmans and your Supermans, where it's like 1,000+ issues long, and there's a new one every 2 weeks or every month. But then you also have miniseries, which are usually between like 3 and 6 issues long, and they have a specific story to tell or want to cover a specific side character, but they don't like have enough popularity to warrant a full ongoing series. Occasionally, a miniseries will procure enough interest to then produce an ongoing series. Wolverine's an example. He had his initial miniseries was only 8 issues long, but eventually he had his own ongoing that ran for like 100, 200 issues. And then companion to the miniseries is the Maxi series, which usually runs for 12 issues over the course of a year, and that tells... Maxi series are usually covering an important storyline that like has ramifications outside of the Maxi series itself, or the Maxi series is a completely self-contained story. So the famous Watchmen story is a Maxi series, ran for 12 issues, completely self-contained. Eventually did have its own miniseries spin-offs, and it eventually did cross over with the mainstream DC universe, but it was initially a self-contained Maxi series. An annual is a single issue of a comic book. It's usually oversized. The name says it's all. It's a special issue that's released once a year. Like usually, it starts 1 year from when that ongoing series started, and then continues on another like every year from that date. But sometimes annuals can get a little funky. That's just, I don't know. I don't know how to finish that. It just happens. Comic books are weird. Publishers are always looking for like ways to shake things up, which leads to inconsistent things and constant relaunching of ongoings, and you never really know what's going on. You also have one-shots. Those are single issue stories that are usually one-shots can range from being self-contained to being part of like a bigger storyline, where it's usually if there's like a really big Maxi series that's going on, or like some summer event, they'll have a one-shot as like a prelude, and then a one-shot as an epilogue. Or like during the event, there'll be a one-shot or a mini-series of like, here's what this character is doing at this time. Those usually, sometimes crossovers will bleed into the ongoings, and sometimes the crossovers will just have a one-shot showing that character. So like, I can't think of an example. I apologize. My brain could not catch up with my mouth. What else is there to talk about? Right. Okay. So let's talk about continuity. Continuity is the biggest barrier in getting into comics. Continuity is what's considered. I'm trying to figure out how to define it without using other terms that I haven't defined yet. I'm going to define both continuity and canon because they're hand in hand. Continuity is what's considered in canon, and what's considered in canon is the events in universe history that are like considered to be real things that actually happened. So in terms of like Marvel versus DC, Marvel's continuity, their take on continuity is like everything that we've ever printed since 1963 happened. And just deal with it.
It's all canon.
It's all canon. Everything's, unless it's very specifically like an alternate timeline of some sort, or retcon, which is another term that I'll get to right now since I'm using it. Retcon stands for retroactive continuity, which is when a writer goes back and changes something in the past, or adds on to something in the past, or deletes something in the past in the context of their current ongoing. So let me think of an example. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. In the first,
no one knows what that is.
The ones with Tobey Maguire in it, where Willem Dafoe was the Green Goblin.
Okay, cool.
The first couple, like the big live-action Spider-Man movies from the early 2000s. In the first Spider-Man movie, they showed that it was only the one guy that shot and killed Uncle Ben. Spoilers, by the way.
For anyone who hasn't seen the live-action Spider-Man from almost 20 years ago.
For anyone who hasn't seen that movie, spoilers, Uncle Ben dies. So in the first movie, it shows that like it was only the one guy that shot and killed Uncle Ben, and then Peter tracks him down, and it's the big changing moment of when he decides to be Spider-Man, yada, yada, yada. But in the third Spider-Man film, which no one talks about because it's bad.
Trash.
I like it because it's hilarious, but it's bad. It's not hilarious because of how they wrote it. It's hilarious because it's bad. In the third one, they say, no, actually, there were two guys that shot Uncle Ben, and the second guy became Sandman. So that's an example of a retcon. A retcon is just a changing continuity. So Marvel's continuity is basically like everything we ever published is canon, deal with it. DC's take on it is like every like 10 to 20 years, they just decide, we're tired of this canon, and they just redo all of it.
Start from scratch.
It makes it both easier and more difficult to get in because like they'll never like fully start from scratch because they still want to keep in that crowd of like old time fans, but they want to also get in like the new fans. So they'll do like this weird half and half thing where it's like, this is canon, but this is not. And you have to figure it out because we're not telling you. Sorry. Okay. We're running out of time. I told you I could talk for long enough. Crossover.
We've been saying the same thing for the past 30 minutes.
Canon's a complicated thing to explain. A crossover is pretty self-explanatory. It's when two ongoings cross over and like interact with each other. Yeah, I think that's all the terms. In terms of like in-universe stuff that we might be talking about, a mutant, in case you're wondering, that's like X-Men stuff in Marvel. A mutant is someone who was born with the X gene, and when they're in puberty, it activates and gives them superpowers. And then a mutate is the Marvel term for someone who gained their powers through exterior means, like being bitten by a radioactive spider.
Right. Cool.
And then in DC, the blanket term for superhuman is a metahuman. I think that's all the terms. We've got like 7 minutes left, so I'm going to hurry up. Your assignment, I don't know if I like the word assignment, your reading suggestion for 2 weeks' time is Marvel Masterworks, The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, which I believe collects Amazing Fantasy 15 and I think the first 10 issues of The Amazing Spider-Man.
It's a long thing.
There's a lot of the Marvel Masterworks series is Marvel collecting and reprinting their older comics for newer audiences because they're kind of hard to track down. So just the first issue or the first volume of Marvel Masterworks. Normally, I'd like to give some background on how Spider-Man was created, but we're short on time, so I'll just we'll just talk. Well, you know what? We'll talk about that in 2 weeks' time when we're
talking about
discussing this. Yeah. It's a lot of fairly interesting stuff about the office drama going on between Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
Who is Jack Kirby?
Jack Kirby was probably the biggest, like, most influential artist in comic book history. He did the art for X-Men, Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Thor. He did all the New God stuff in DC. So, like, for any of you that have seen the Justice League movie, all the stuff with, like, Darkseid and Steppenwolf and the mother boxes, that was all Jack Kirby's brain. But he wasn't treated very well by the industry he worked in. So there's a lot of drama that we'll talk about. Closing statements. If you have any questions, suggestions, comments, etc. that you want us to talk about on the show, you can reach us on Twitter at CBBCPod. That's at CBBCPod. Or email us at cbbcpod@gmail.com. At some point, I don't know if I'm going to I'll probably put up this episode. We're going to be putting up our episodes after the fact on our YouTube page and Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. Those details will be on our Twitter as soon as I figure out how to upload the things. But yeah, all of that will be under the Comic Book Club podcast. And that spiel took less time than I imagined. Do you have any closing words, Kendra?
Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone that managed to fight their way through the murky technical issues and stuck with us long enough to hear, thank you so very much. We do really appreciate it. I know that I've been trying to get this show on the air since last spring, but because of the way that the world is burning down around us, I haven't been able to. So this is like the first actual episode.
And give a round of applause for your brand new baby host, Matt.
Yeah, this is my first time on the air. Kendra's old and has done this a lot, but this is my first time, and I somehow convinced her to do this with me. So next up on the digital band is Infinite Scoby. I think that's how it's pronounced. Hosted by Cameron and Olivia. That's probably a good show. Give it a listen. Support college radio. We're having fun here.
We're not allowed to give any commands.
Right. So, I would suggest that you give it a listen, and I would suggest that you support college radio because we're having fun here.
So do those things if you feel...
If you want to. If you feel so inclined. I think that's all I have to say.
Yeah.
I've been planning this for like a year now, and I've never figured out how to end it. So bye.